Time is money, and for Olympic athletes, it's gold.
I lost in the 1991 World Championships by 0.04 of a second.
Time is on our side. See how it can win a war. There's no time like the present, but see how you can travel to the future.
There is absolutely no doubt about that sort of time travel.
Does time fly when you're having fun? Find out for yourself. Captain Zero, a time-traveling hero, protecting the past and planning the future. From comic books to the movies, we've been fascinated with the possibility of traveling in time. Now time travel is no longer science fiction. Leading physicists actually think it's possible, at least in theory. Though traveling to the future and traveling to the past are very different problems. Traveling to the future is relatively easy.
Traveling into time into the future, having your time slow down, has been confirmed by numerous experiments that have been carried out over the past 50 years. It is absolutely true. There is absolutely no doubt about that sort of time travel.
Well, Albert Einstein showed in 1905 in special relativity that time travel to the future was actually quite easy to do. All you needed was a spaceship that would travel very close to the speed of light.
Time travel may sound like today's wildest science fiction, but it's a reality based on Einstein's revolutionary ideas about time. The most crucial of those ideas is that time isn't constant. It runs differently if you take a trip on a rocket or even an elevator.
Everybody from the time of Galileo and Newton on had assumed that there was an absolute time. But it was Einstein who pointed out that time is relative to the observer, that your time is not my time. That if we each had individual accurate clocks and we had different histories of how we move and where we go, we would come back and join each other, our clocks would read differently.
Our clocks would read differently because, according to Einstein, speed and gravity can actually alter the flow of time. In 1975, Carroll Alley set out to test Einstein. Would time on a plane be different?
We had two identical clock boxes, and we would fly one in this Navy P-3C for a total of 15 hours from dusk until dawn. We would also compare the time on the ground with the time in the aircraft by using short laser pulses. This was the actual Einstein prescription. How do you synchronize clocks at a distance? And during these flights, we could actually see in real time the change in the airborne clock with respect to the ground clock by means of this light pulse time comparison.
The difference in speed and gravity between the airborne clock and the ground clock had created a time difference of 50 millionths of a second. And this wasn't due to some mechanical effect on the clock. On the airplane, time itself had slowed down. The door to traveling into the future was open. Because of speed's effect on time, the Gemini 7 astronauts aged 400 millionths of a second less than people on Earth. The Gemini 12 astronauts, 100 millionths. The results even reached the ear of Richard Nixon, who joked with the returning Apollo astronauts.
Yeah. I understand Frank Borman says you're a little younger by reason of having going into space. Is that right? Do you feel that way, a little younger? Well, a lot younger than Frank Borman.
But according to Einstein, to go more than microseconds into the future, astronauts will need to travel much faster. They'll need to travel near the speed of light. That's 27,000 times faster than anyone has ever flown.
The fastest we've gone in a rocket ship so far is about 25,000 miles an hour. That was the Apollo flights to the moon. And we need to go about 300,000 kilometers per second to go up near the speed of, that's the speed of light. So it's quite a bit that we need to increase our speed.
There are various proposals to make a rocket ship go sufficiently fast, so huge amounts of time dilation are generated. One such proposal is to use an antimatter rocket. That is, the rocket ship is propelled by annihilating matter and antimatter.
Traveling at the speed of light, an astronaut will age years less than people on Earth. He'll return home far into the future, long after his friends have died.
Have you any idea what year this is, right here, right now?
Of course I know what year it is. What's that got to do with it?
Everything. Major, this is 2024.
It's what?
Of course, there's no guarantee he'll like the future. Can he ever get back? According to Einstein, the answer is no.
Who are you? What are you doing to me?
No law of physics permits backwards time travel, or so it was thought. In 1974, Frank Tipler startled the scientific community with an ingenious thought experiment in the tradition of Einstein, but involving travel to the past, not the future. His model is a rotating cylinder, just like this carousel. If the cylinder is massive enough and spins close to the speed of light, its gravity will be so strong that it actually twists time into a loop.
What I proposed is that you can create a time machine by rotating a massive body, just like this carousel is rotating. If you have a very massive body rotating, it will twist time in a very strange way, so that if you move in the direction that we're now moving, the direction of the carousel, you will actually go backwards into time as you turn around.
But Dr. Tipler's carousel isn't the only way to travel back in time. Another way involves incredibly thin, dense strands of matter left over from the Big Bang. These are called cosmic strings, and with their help, Dr. Gott recently cooked up a way to travel back into the past.
So here's a recipe for building a time machine that would travel to the past. You start out with a cosmic string. These are hypothetical objects that might be left over from the very early universe, very high density material. And this, because of their high mass density, the space around the cosmic string is curved. It's not flat like this pizza, but it's like a pizza with a slice cut out of it. So if I cut a slice out of this pizza, and I throw the slice away, I'm left with a geometry that's like a cone.
The gravity of the cosmic string is so great that it distorts the space around it into a cone, just like this pizza. A beam of light must try to go straight across and thus get sucked into the cone. But a space traveler can take a shortcut around the edge and actually beat the light beam to the other side.
Because this distance is shorter, I could have a little spaceship and fly on my spaceship here at 99.99% the speed of light, and because this is shorter distance, actually beat the light beam across.
So Dr. Gott has found a way to go faster than light. And if you go faster than light, you actually go backwards in time. And you can even meet yourself.
Space-time is sufficiently twisted so that I can arrive not only at the place, but at the time that I started. So I can shake hands with myself as I was about to start the trip.
That should cut down on your time travel, my good doctor.
It's too bad, Mr. Xander, that you are not interested in science.
For those interested in science, time travel, at least in theory, seems possible. Actually building these machines is another matter. But if we could someday go to the past, is history safe? Could we stop Hitler? Some physicists think the past is inviolate. We simply cannot change it. But what would prevent us from, say, saving JFK? Would we lose our nerve, or would something even stranger happen?
You cannot change the past of this particular universe. What you might be able to do is go backwards into time and radically change the past. The result would be is that you would, so to speak, be knocked into another universe in which that change was the past.
Yes, that's right. If you try to change the past, some physicists think you'll be knocked into a parallel universe. If that's not strange enough, time travel might allow famous discoveries to come from nowhere.
Information can pass around a loop in such a way where it's hard to see where the information was created. In the following sense, if you have someone, time traveler from the future, might go back, visit Einstein, give him the equations of special relativity. In the far future, someone would be able to read them. The time traveler could then bring them back and show them to Einstein. So you might ask, well, where did these equations come from? Since Einstein didn't think of them, he got them from the time traveler, and the time traveler didn't think of them, he got them from reading Einstein's book.
Captain Zero.
That rifleman's going to try to sneak through and shoot Molly Pitcher.
Time travel raises strange paradoxes. Will Captain Zero be able to travel back in time and save Molly Pitcher from the Redcoats?
Beginning to dematerialize.
And by doing so, is he preserving history or is he creating it?
Fall back, you blasted redcoat!
These questions are no longer confined to the movies. Science fiction is fast becoming science.
Rocket travel to the moon. It was ridiculed as complete nonsense in an editorial in the 1920s in the New York Times. Now we know it is possible. Why do we know it? Because we have done it. It was known in the early part of this century that such a thing was technically feasible. The laws of physics permitted it. People just had to be sufficiently clever to make use of the laws of physics. So it is with his various notions of time travel. The laws of physics permit it, and I think we have to accept that it's possible.
The aircraft carrier George Washington is one of the most sophisticated ships afloat. To find its way in the ocean, to land and launch planes, it has every conceivable high-tech navigation instrument. So what in the world are these sailors doing, still using the stars to navigate? And why is the key piece of equipment a watch? As they find their way, these sailors are part of the age-old quest for the perfect clock.
44.6. 43.9.
We have predetermined stars that we've gone and figured out for to shoot, which are the heavy bodies. For example, we're going to shoot the code shaft. Okay? We take the star down to the horizon. The most important thing about using celestial bodies, be it the sun, the stars, the moon, or the planets, is time. Because everything is related to the time.
Until the 18th century, sailors had no way to figure out their longitude. The lucky ended up only a few hundred miles off course. The unlucky ones lost at sea. Then astronomers offered a solution. They compiled an almanac of star positions as they appear over Greenwich, England, any day of the year, any time of the day. A navigator on a ship could use a sextant to measure the angle of a star above the horizon. He could then compare his angle with the position at Greenwich given in the almanac. The key was having an accurate watch, for the stars are constantly moving targets. But the pendulum clocks of the day weren't very accurate, and they weren't much use on a moving ship. The race was on for the perfect clock. What watchmaker Jim Michaels calls a chronometer.
There was a commission set up in England that would offer a prize of £20,000, I believe it was, to anyone who could come up with a chronometer that would meet very strict standards. And John Harrison was spent his whole life, he was a carpenter by trade, spent his whole life developing different mechanisms that would pass this test.
First, Harrison had to find a mixture of metals that wouldn't change with temperature. Then he had to perfect a new type of pendulum that wouldn't be swayed by the moving ship. He used a hairspring, like this one. Harrison spent 40 years perfecting the clock. During a final test voyage to the Caribbean, it lost only 7 seconds.
He eventually, after 3 attempts, won it. And he won the £20,000.
Which translates to $12 million in today's money. But the perfect clock was worth much more than that to England.
But the English used to say that the sun never set on their empire, and that was one of the main reasons, is because the chronometer allowed them to sail all over the world. That's the first time it's ticked probably in 40 years.
World War II. Clocks were still the key to winning the seas, but the U.S. Navy, caught unprepared, suddenly needed thousands of these handmade, one-of-a-kind timepieces. The job of mass production fell on the Hamilton Watch Company and these former employees.
Before the war started, we maybe had 1,000 or a few more employees making watches only. And at the height of the war effort, we had over 3,000 people working.
Oh, yes, gosh. We used to work 12-hour shifts 7 days a week.
Hamilton was the first company that really mass-produced a chronometer. I believe 11,000 over a 3-year period, and that's more chronometers that were in existence to that time.
But we started, I guess, about 1941, assembling our first chronometers, and I'll never forget the day when we got the first one assembled out of parts that we manufactured at Hamilton. That was a glorious day.
The clock that won the war, you almost have to contribute to the Marine chronometer, I would think.
The Navy was afraid that the German subs would land some Marines, German Marines, and they'd make their way to Lancaster and blow up the Hamilton plant because Hamilton was the only one producing the chronometers during the war.
I worked with a Swiss engineer that came to the watch factory after the war was over. He said Hamilton came up with a better Marine chronometer than the Swiss ever produced. He said, why? Because they had to.
Victory at sea belonged to America, even though the Axis had a superior navy. Many credit the clock. But the clock should be a quaint relic on the $3 billion George Washington, given the intense demands faced by today's navigators. Right now, he's positioning the carrier to launch a series of planes.
What we're doing right now is setting ourselves into the wind, which we are. We're coming up on speed so we can get the minimum winds over the deck for the heaviest aircraft, which in this case is going to be an A6 tanker.
The carrier must always be moving into the wind for both takeoffs and landings.
To meet the navigation demands, the ship now relies on satellites and the Global Positioning System, or GPS for short. GPS helps the navigator stay inside his small corner of the ocean.
We are designated to remain within Charlie right now. As you can see, you'll see it just labeled Charlie. Once you get into the Persian Gulf, they'll chop the ocean up into these blocks. And we have to manage ourselves and stay inside those blocks. Besides having a box to manage yourself in, you have extremely shallow water. Down to deepest areas are maybe 160, 200 feet. Territorial seas you have to worry about. You have Iran, you have Iraq, you have Qatar, you have Kuwait.
With challenges like these, why even bother with old technology?
If something does go wrong with the electronics, if a satellite fails for one reason or another, I have my quartermasters that can still shoot the stars and still give me a good fix. And as you can see, where he plotted our fix today was within 1,000 yards or less of where the GPS had us, which is extremely accurate in open ocean.
In war, you may be able to knock out a satellite, but you can't knock out the stars. That's why every day on this high-tech vessel, the quartermasters still shoot the stars. They still check the ship's clocks, and they even report their status to the captain.
And reports the approaching hour of 12 o'clock. All chronometers have been compared. Request permission to strike 8 bells on time.
Strike 8 bells on time.
But how does the Navy know what time it really is? To set their clocks, they rely on the Naval Observatory in Washington.
The time ball was a ball that was dropped from the top of the Naval Observatory dome every day precisely at 12 noon.
Now, the Naval Observatory has more sophisticated ways to share the time, and they've also become the official timekeeper for America.
25 minutes, 25 seconds.
The clock behind me is the master clock for the Department of Defense in the United States.
Universal time, 17 hours, 26 minutes, exactly.
Today, the steady vibrations of atoms has replaced the pendulum. This natural vibration is so consistent that these atomic clocks are accurate to a billionth of a second per day. But how does the Naval Observatory determine the official time?
Oh, we have about 50 clocks on the grounds of the observatory. We have a clock vault, which has about 12 clocks in it. We have another clock vault, which has about 5 clocks in it. And we have in Building 52 a more modern facility, and we have the majority of our clocks in that one building right now. We have them stored in environmental chambers. We keep the temperature to within about 1/4 of a degree centigrade and about 1% humidity. And we have them all connected so we can make measurements to compare them. These measurements are then passed on to another computer, which then averages them together.
So there's not one master clock. The official time is actually the average of many clocks.
17 hours, 26
And what kind of watch does America's timekeeper wear?
I don't wear a watch. If I do my job right, don't have to worry about carrying the clock with me. I can look around and see what time it is all over here.
Now we have atomic time, so accurate we can measure the spinning of the Earth. NASA does this by bouncing laser beams off the moon. This laser experiment was set up by the first astronauts to land on the moon. They left behind this simple reflector to bounce the laser beams back to Earth. Once, the daily rotation of the Earth was the best timekeeper, but atomic clocks and the laser experiment show that the Earth is slowing down by 1,000th of a second per day. Atomic time is so precise, we'll actually have to add a leap second to adjust for the Earth's inaccuracy. The tardy Earth would never make it on military time.
There are things that have to happen at a specific time because you're not the only player in this big picture. It's kind of like a Broadway play. If the main person comes out and starts saying their lines at the wrong time, all the meaning is lost.
If an airplane is just 1 second too long in getting out of the landing area, it means I'm not able to land the aircraft behind.
1 second means a lot to a pilot. 1 second could mean he could be inside the window for a missile shoot or outside the missile shoot. For somebody dropping a torpedo could mean that the target, the submarine in this case, could be in or outside the weapons parameters.
Time for me, I'm thinking 2 times here. That's launch time and recovery time. I have to meet both of them. That's the whole objective here.
Now microseconds matter to the Navy, and once again, it's navigators who need the precision. The global positioning system depends on the high accuracy of atomic clocks.
Well, the mission today
simulating that we have a contact boat that we believe is carrying suspect cargo. A surface ship has been trying to contact it, to ask it to stop, to investigate its cargo. They've been uncooperative thus far. What we plan to do is use an assault force from the ship, using our helicopters to go in to take down the ship and stop it. Using GPS, we can fly the assault force in at low level to attack the ship and use the element of surprise.
GPS is composed of 24 satellites, each carrying an atomic clock. When a navigator shoots these man-made stars, not with a sextant, but a computer receiver, the satellites send down a time signal. By measuring how long it takes to hear from each satellite, the computer calculates distances and figures out the exact location. Once, pilots worried that a navigation error would lead to an attack on the wrong ship. Now, GPS is so precise, there's no possibility of error. But is the global positioning system accurate enough for the most challenging carrier activity, landing a plane?
The first time you go out and you're flying overhead the carrier, waiting to go down for the brake and everything, you're like, wow, that does look really little from where I'm at.
The Navy would like to use GPS to help land planes, maybe even bring them in automatically.
You have to remember the boat is always moving away from you. So you're always having to correct for that movement. You're landing on a moving object. Plus you throw in a little wind, a little what we call the burble, which is when the boat makes its own wind. It kind of gives a sucker hole right at the end of the ramp and a big lifty a little ways away from the ramp. So you're correcting for one, and coming down there are a lot of variables.
A clock error of only a millionth of a second means GPS is off by 1,000 feet. With today's atomic clocks, GPS can give position to an amazing 30 feet. But is it enough?
If you are 10 feet off, they will wave you off. You are out of a specific window that they have. They will wave you off. You will add power and you will come around and you will try again.
So GPS is still years away from meeting its toughest assignment. That will require even better clocks. Once again, navigation will fuel the next generation of timepieces. The quest for the perfect clock will continue.
U.S. Naval Observatory Master Clock. At the tone, Eastern Daylight Time, 13 hours, 25 minutes, 25 seconds.
One second is night and day. It is the difference between winning and losing. It's the difference between gold and silver. It's the difference between bronze and eighth.
My event can be decided by 100th of a second. Olympic trials in 92, first and second place were 100th behind each other, 100th of a second. So.
1 second to me means 14 meters, because in my event that's what it translates to. It means a lot. I lost in the 1991 World Championships by 0.04 of a second, which is, it's not a lot of time. And I won the World Championships in 1992 by almost 2 seconds, which to me was 1.5 miles.
In sports, it's simple. The fastest time wins. That's why these Olympic swimmers and cyclists are doing everything they can to save time. Here at the Olympic Training Center, the focus is on saving fractions, 100th, even 1,000th of a second. Training hard is only the first step. To win the gold today, these athletes need the help of physiologists, biomechanists, and engineers who review every moment of the race. For the national bicycling team, winning begins with a quick and flawless start.
Do a 2K, flying 2K, bring it in at 20.5 or under.
But the rules of international cycling limit these track bikes to a single gear. That makes the standing start a supreme physical challenge.
Key to a good start is just being smooth, getting out of the hole quickly, getting on top of the gear quickly. It's a fine line between, with finding the right gear. You want a gear that you can get up to speed fast, but when you're going nearly 60K an hour for 4.5 minutes or 4 minutes for the team pursuit event, you got to have a gear that you can pedal comfortably, and that comfort zone for us is around 140 RPM. So we need to have a gear that will allow us to go the right speed at 140 RPM and still be able to get out of the hole fast enough. It's pretty exact science.
A team of engineers is redesigning the American bike. The effort began after the 1992 Olympics, when the team had one of its worst showings in recent history. Now, nearly every component has been streamlined to reduce wind resistance.
Even the pedal is smaller, so that it's for better aerodynamics. Plus, on the track, you've got better cornering.
Well, we just started using this helmet this year. It's basically just a fairing for the head. It's very narrow on the front, which makes it more aerodynamic. We have actually golf ball divots on the top, which smooth the airflow out and help you to go faster yet. And then it's shaped long to fit behind the bridge of the neck to help smooth the airflow out as well.
1-6, pick it up.
Also new is an ultra-small front wheel, which allows for better drafting.
The smaller the front wheel is, the smaller the whole length of the bike is, and therefore the line can actually be closer. We're saving just centimeters. Closer you can ride to the guy in front of you, the more energy you can save. But then, of course, it is more dangerous. You're a centimeter away from a crash the whole race.
When you go to the line on one of those bikes, you really feel like this is a huge advantage for me. That when the exercise physiologists and the biomechanists come to you and they say, this bike is worth 2 seconds on the line, and you know that the guy on the other side of the track is 1.5 seconds faster than you, you might have a good chance to beat him.
My start, I've changed it over from a 2-foot up front to a track start, like a track athlete that jumps out of the blocks to get that little extra edge, jump off a lot faster. I'm in the sprint event. Any little mistake could mess up your event. I mean, considering that you know that 1/100th of a second can mean the difference between first and third place.
Ideally, you want, like, this is your head, my fingertips, and my feet are my elbow. You want your head to lead everything in to that same hole, so that there'd be really little splash. It's almost like it sucks the water into it with you. And he had a little splash, but I mean, it's pretty good. You can see his reaction.
A fast fly turn takes about, a really fast one takes faster than 0.75 to execute. It's really easy to be slower than 0.80. That's 0.05 of a second. 0.05 of a second is a lifetime in this sport.
Even swimmers are looking to new technology to give them an edge. Mark Henderson has been ranked #2 in the world in the butterfly. Can a new high-tech swimsuit or a low-tech razor make him #1?
We're measuring Mark's passive resistance. We're trying to figure out in a nice streamlined position how much resistance he has from the water.
Oh yeah, we try to be as slick as possible once we hit the water. We have shaving parties beforehand, maybe about 4 days before. All of us get together and shave down. A lot of us shave our heads. I've shaved USA in my head a few times, shaved the flag in my head. It's a lot of national pride. When you get up there, you're up there to win for the country, not just for yourself.
By comparing the swimmer's speed before and after shaving, scientists have found that the razor can save about 1/100th of a second. A new top-secret swimsuit that's slicker than human skin can save another 100th. But to save more time, Mark will have to improve his stroke, and scientists will have to stop time. In 1872, Edward Muybridge needed to stop time. He was involved in a heated debate about whether all 4 feet of a trotting horse left the ground. His battery of cameras provided the definitive answer. Then Muybridge turned his cameras on human motion. By stopping time, he gained the first scientific insight into walking, running, and other sports. Jane Kappert is stopping time in the Muybridge tradition.
This is a 2-camera, 3-dimensional analysis.
But now she has the power of the computer.
Both cameras that we took video.
She can not only slow down Mark's movements, she can animate them and calculate how much force he's exerting on each part of the stroke. She's discovered a subtle flaw, one that's leading to wasted energy.
This in-sweep phase where he's coming underneath the water, it seems as if he's dropping his elbows slightly, and if he could keep them higher a little bit, he might be able to send some of those forces more in the propulsive direction.
This may give Mark the microsecond edge he needs to win, but he won't be zooming by his opponents. Races are so close, it's hard to tell who the winner is. Once, judges used handheld stopwatches, but their reaction time added an error of 0.2 of a second. Now, automatic timers and photo finishes are far better than the human eye. In fact, a race like this isn't even close. A photo finish shows over 0.02 of a second separates the riders. If needed, this race could be judged to 100,000th of a second or better. But sports timing has surprising limits.
We time the kilo and the pursuit races to the 1,000th of a second. That's about an inch at the speeds that the riders are going these days. There are other factors that can affect a ride by far more than that. For example, a gust of wind that comes up in the wrong direction at the end of a race can easily rob a competitor of a few thousandths of a second. So I don't think that more precision in timing is going to make any difference.
And at the pool, laser measurements reveal that the length of each lane is slightly different. That tiny variation may be enough to determine the winner of a close race.
Well, we've got a measurement. It comes out to right around 50 meters. It's a little bit over by maybe 1/8 of an inch.
We can now time more accurately than we can build pools. In fairness, swimming now only times to the 100th of a second. The first Olympic tie came in 1984, and we should expect more ties in the future, for we have reached the limit of sports timing. But don't worry, when a fraction of a second means winning, losing, or tying, athletes will still try anything for that extra edge.
And then you can grow your fingernails out. Some girls put Lee press-on nails on, or those just, I don't know, glamour nails, so that they can get, just because, I mean, in swimming, it really is, sometimes it comes down to 100th of a second. And that could be 100th of a second. You never know.
Bob Levine wants to know how fast we move.
I'm measuring at a distance of 60 feet right now. We're going to begin clocking pedestrians who are walking alone for this and get a sense of what average walking speed is. So I'm going to move into an unobtrusive place right now. And I'm going to begin clocking people.
Levine is measuring the pace of life across America. His slowest walkers are in Fresno, California. At a time of 14.7 for the 60-foot dash, they're nearly 3 seconds behind the leader.
Of the 36 cities that we looked at in the United States, we found that New York City had the fastest walking speed. The gentleman who collected the data talked about how there was a mugging at one point, then a jug band got in the middle of it, and even with all that action going on, it still had the fastest speeds of the 36.
Levine has made the streets unsafe. For everywhere, he's lurking.
Excuse me, do you have the time, please?
It's 9:25.
I'm sorry?
9:25.
It's 9:35.
10 till 10.
It's 20 after 9.
It's,
He wants to know how you keep track of time. It's another indicator of the pace of life.
We're taking a very quick measure of people's concern with clock time, looking at the accuracy of clocks in public places.
Levine has never been arrested for his work, but in his relentless pursuit, he has found Atlanta to be the least punctual city. Only 55% of the population wears watches, compared to 90% of New Yorkers. Of course, that doesn't mean the watches are accurate.
I'm sorry? Thanks very much. I remember asking a fellow in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil what the time was, and I had my watch calibrated to the exact time of day, and asked this gentleman what the time was, and he looked at me very emphatically and said, "It is exactly 3:30, and it was, I believe, about 9 o'clock in the morning at that time. Hi, can you tell me the difference between certified mail?
Levine wants to know where the motor mouths are. To measure talking speed, he counts the number of syllables per second.
It arrives in 2 to 3 days.
Columbus, Ohio is fastest at almost 4 syllables a second. Slowest, Detroit, is almost 2 syllables behind.
If it took somebody 60 seconds
Levine,
to tell it,
whose own talking speed is 3.5 syllables per second, has combined all his studies to calculate an overall pace of life index. The slowest city in America? Los Angeles. In fact, California cities fill the bottom half. The fastest cities are on the East Coast. Number 1, Boston, followed by Buffalo and New York City. How did we get so fast? One innovation forever changed the pace of life and the meaning of time.
If I were to come into a large train station like this in, say, 1880, it'd be very difficult for me to know exactly what time it was. I would probably have a watch as a traveler, or I'd have a sense of what time it was. But when I got to the train station, I would most likely find that it was being used by, say, 3 or 4 different train lines. Each one of those train lines would use its own standard of time. Much before the Civil War, there was no standard of time. Each community used its own standard derived from the local sun as it passed overhead. For example, if you're traveling from New York and your watch is set to New York time, by the time you get to Buffalo, you will have gone through dozens at least of different local times. So the railroads begin to meet to kind of try to coordinate their schedules. And on November 18th, 1883, the American railroads and the Canadian railroads adopt the 4-zone system that we use today. And they assume that the public will just follow the railroads because the railroads dominate American commerce. November 18th, 1883 was called in the press the Day of 2 Noons, because there actually are 2 noons on that day.
So to make the trains run more efficiently, the railroads invented and imposed an arbitrary system of time. This was a radical notion. Many felt the new time zones were unnatural, even an insult against God.
I'm standing in front of a plaque dedicated to William Frederick Allen, who really, more than anyone else, introduced the system of standard time zones that we have now. One of the ironic things about this plaque is that it has a rising sun above it, and below it you can see the standard time clocks. The irony is that standard time makes the sun irrelevant. In some places in standard time zones, you can be as much as 45 minutes or even an hour away from the local noon. The sun becomes far less relevant, and in that sense, nature becomes less relevant as a regulator of human affairs. It's not an accident that shortly after the invention of standard time, the first mechanical punch clock is patented, and the first systems for standardizing the time of a factory begin to appear, so that all the workers in a factory are organized under the same single time. The most famous example is Frederick W. Taylor. He's often called the father of scientific management, who first began to time individual workers with a stopwatch and break their motions down and then reassemble them. In some ways, it almost seems as if the advent of standard time makes it possible for Taylor to imagine synchronizing a whole factory. And he would often use the metaphor, move like clockwork, that under my management, the factory will move like clockwork.
Standard time, established only 100 years ago, gave rise to the modern pace of life. And now, we are ruled by clocks.
Well, essentially, I'm going to purchase a postage stamp and see how long it takes. Can I get one 32-cent stamp, please? I'm going to ask for a 32-cent stamp and hold out a $5 bill and see how long it takes the clerk to complete the transaction for me.
Bob Levine isn't interested in making these workers more efficient. Instead, he wants to know if living fast has a downside. Are faster people less polite? Just ask a New Yorker.
One of the worst experiences in gathering data was when we asked to buy a stamp at the main post office in New York City. And there was a woman behind there who took my $5 bill and raised it up. She raised it up, put it over her head, and very slowly started to yell out, you mean you want to buy one 32-cent stamp and you're giving me a $5 bill bellowing it out, and that was worth about 10 seconds off of New York's time right there.
By dropping a pen and seeing if someone will pick it up, Levine has actually proved that people in faster cities are less likely to take the time to help others. He's trying to test his conclusion with more studies.
We've also had people dress up as blind people who wait at a traffic light when the light turns green and see if people will help them cross the street. We've also dropped letters, stamped, addressed envelopes, and we place them around in downtown areas and see whether people will retrieve it and put it in a mailbox. In New York, only from New York did we get back a letter with the side completely torn open, and written across the top of it was a pretty nasty accusation about my mother and calling me an irresponsible something. And what was maybe most curious about that is that this was scored in the helpful. That was one of the few helpful responses that we got back from New York.
But the faster and meaner cities may be heading for a crash.
We asked whether there was such a thing as a Type A city. Is there a Type A place? And in our 36 U.S. city study, we looked at the relationship between pace of life to death rates from coronary heart disease. And in fact, we found a substantial relationship between a city's overall pace of life and its rate of death from coronary heart disease.
Living fast must take its toll on the body. But what is driving our internal clock?
Can you just tilt your back more, please?
For almost 4 days, Jay Albrecht will be locked away without a watch. He is being wired as part of an experiment to measure the accuracy of the body's clock. As Jay settles into his windowless home, his activity will be monitored from a control room. He can read and cook, but there's no television and no writing. The researchers want to know what he does when there's nothing to do, and what his clock is like when there's no way to keep time.
All right, folks, this is the start of the very first day. It's Friday. My estimate is that it's 10:30 in the morning.
Every few hours, Jay must estimate the time and give his temperature.
Dr. Albrecht, could I get a temperature and time estimate, please?
We measure temperature the only way there is to measure temperature. That's with an indwelling rectal thermistor. It's a very small piece of vinyl wire that's inserted about 10 centimeters in the rectum. It sounds worse than it is. And subjects wear it 24 hours a day, except for when they're showering or going to the bathroom.
It's a small price to pay for science, for the temperature data is proving to be the key to our sense of time.
The temperature is 36.80, and the time is, as I estimated, 6 p.m. on Saturday.
Thank you.
Temperature changes systematically across a 24-hour day. It's one of our many circadian rhythms, and our body temperature is highest at 4 o'clock in the afternoon or thereabouts, and lowest around 4 o'clock in the morning. And we found that a subject's estimation of the passage of, say, an hour parallels that circadian rhythm in body temperature, so that when temperature is high, a subjective hour is shorter than when temperature is low.
What Scott has found is that when temperature is highest, perception is skewed so that time seems to run slow. When temperature is low, time seems to fly. As we age, our body temperature decreases by about ½ degree, and so time flies even faster.
It's a well-known adage that time flies when you're older, and when you're young, Christmas seems to take forever to get here. And in fact, that's probably related to the changes in metabolism that occur across the lifespan.
For Jay and other people in their 60s, time seems to run over 20% faster than a young adult's. But in this experiment, Jay is proving another well-known adage. A watched pot never boils. He keeps hoping for the approach of Monday morning, when the experiment will end.
Good morning or good afternoon. I figure it's about noontime on Sunday. I would estimate that it's 11 or 12 midnight on Sunday evening. Well, good morning, folks. I figure that it's 8 o'clock on Monday morning. Well, it's been about 24 hours, in my estimation, since I announced that it should be about 8 o'clock on Monday morning.
Dr. Obrecht? Yeah. Just want to let you know that the study's over. Your time here is all done, basically.
A free man at last.
Yes. Yes, you are.
After 4 days in isolation, Jay is released with first-hand knowledge of just how rotten our internal clocks are. Perhaps that's why we invented watches.
Time seemed to be quite distorted, and evidently what I thought was a day was much less, 16 hours or so.
There's one more intriguing conclusion. Our body temperature affects not only our sense of time, but how we sleep.
It's been shown time and time again that people tend to get their major sleep episode in association with their temperature minimum. But in addition to that, there's a very strong tendency for people to fall asleep at their temperature maximum. And when does that occur? Between 2 and 4 in the afternoon. So not only do we all experience it as a post-lunch dip, but there are entire cultures built around the siesta. And that's not strictly a cultural phenomenon, it is based in biology. Napping is as strong a biological tendency as nighttime sleep, and they're both tied to the circadian rhythm and body temperature.
Bob Levine is studying the siesta culture of Mexico. It's part of his 31-country survey of the world's pace of life. His results show that Mexico, dead last in the survey, is as slow as its stereotype predicts, but it's also the pace that biology dictates. And how fast is the United States? It's not even in the top 10, but smack dab in the middle at number 16. The fastest countries are wealthy ones: Japan, Switzerland, and Germany. Unlike Mexico, they've bypassed biology in favor of economics. It's no coincidence that they're also the best clockmakers in the world. We can now measure something called time to a billionth of a second. But what are we measuring when time varies across countries, across ages, or even across a single day?
You know, it's very interesting. When you think about time, you think about this, what's possibly the most amorphous, subjective, ambiguous a part of our lives. It's really an incredible artificial creation. And I think it's very important when you look at the way different cultures and different countries conceptualize time to realize at least how arbitrary our sense of time is. Excuse me, do you know what time it is, please?
Around 9:45. I don't have a watch.
Oh, have you got a watch? Do you know what time it is, please?
Yeah, I have 10 till 10.
I'm sorry?
10 till 10.
Uh-huh. Thanks very much.
Okay.
Yeah.